Climate change is not a distant threat. Rather, it's the reality impacting millions of people every day. At H&M Group, we are committed to the Paris Agreement, limiting global warming to below 1.5 degrees. And according to the latest IPCC report, the world has reached a now or never state. During the coming decade, we as businesses and private sector will need to work hard together to find scalable solutions. As part of the CEO Alliance of Climate Leaders, we work hard with climate actions and decarbonizing our businesses. And I am so proud to be part of a group of people that work for the same cause with the same direction in mind, to make sure we have a net zero future. So let's now hear from the two co-chairs, Jesper and Christian.
We head to Davos with a feeling that we live in a more and more fragmented world, with the war in Ukraine, the energy crisis, and yet climate change is clearly a global issue which needs a global cooperation, a global view of things. And so at COP27, there was some progress, in particular in the climate finance and wealthier nations being willing to support the poorer nation in their climate issues. But where we made no progress is on the goals, setting targets. And so we are not on track as societies for a 1.5 degree warming of Earth. What gives some hope, certainly to me, is that the two biggest nations and biggest emitters, China and the US, have started to talk to each other again. This must be an encouraging signal for all of us. And it's really important because we as companies in this alliance have all pledged to be net zero 2050, but we'll only be able to achieve that if we work together with governments, and if governments are willing to take some bold actions, and if we support this bold action.
Thank you, Christian. We believe this is the most important decade in the history of humankind. Climate crisis is no longer a distant threat, but a living reality for all of us, and it will require a transformation of business, of economy and life as we know it. We in the Alliance are the only CEO-led community and are a group of big brands and companies representing 12 different industries. And we are committed to be leaders in combating climate change. All of us have our challenges. It may be specific industrial challenges in Scope 3. It may be about making choices that are right for the future, and that makes sense also for business and financially. It may be how to convince stakeholders around us that this is the right path. At the same time, we are convinced that this is not only the right thing to do ethically, what we owe to our children and their children, it's also the only pathway to lower costs, to growth, and to build a stronger brand for the future. So far, we've been able to support each other by sharing plans, best practices, and also dilemmas. We have organized collaboration in areas such as goal setting, reporting, and we've acted together in relation to government, like recently, one of our big prides, when we together with NGOs and youth movement leaders joined forces to, with a shared voice, remind world leaders that the 1.5 temperature increase is not a goal, but a limit, and that any pressure to retreat from the Paris Agreement is simply not acceptable. For us in the Alliance, action speaks louder than words. Together with companies such as H&M, Unilever, Ericsson, BCG, we drive change and reduce 1 gigaton of emissions, equivalent to the size of Japan's annual emission. Now, no one government, business, person can solve this alone. We must work together with speed and action. Therefore, the upcoming meeting in Davos is really important as a milestone, both to engage more leaders and companies, as well as continue our journey to show that it's good business to be a good business. But most of all, it's time we make climate change personal. So please join us. I think you will find it rewarding.
I agree, Jesper. Being part of this group, I find is very useful on the one hand, because we all struggle with some of the same issues, practical issues as we move on. It's interesting to know how others have solved it. But I have to say, it's also inspirational because we hear from some bold action of some colleagues, and usually I walk out of these meetings thinking we need to do more. So I think it's very useful and good to be part of this group. We've also measured the CO2 emissions that we have as a group. And between 2019 and 2020, reduced carbon emission in scope 1 and 2 by 22%. It's partially due to COVID, but it's much more than, for example, the reduction that major nations had. So there's clear action happening within these companies. Now, as you know, we have agreed together on some priorities for next year, and there's basically 3 big priorities. The first one is scope 3, which is something we can do much more about, and where most of the emissions lie that we have, in particular with all of our suppliers, so upstream scope 3. All of us have thousands of suppliers. And for us to be net zero, they have to be net zero. So it's really important that we reach out, we tell them that, and start this snowball effect. Now, some of that is challenging, as you know very well. I know IKEA is far ahead with that because many of those are small and medium enterprises and they need support and help. And so we want to learn also from IKEA and other companies who have gone that way, how to do that in a proper way, how to do that to be useful and to get some real action in this value chain. The second pillar is scope 2, so the energy. All of us are using some green energy, some of us completely, but we're global companies. And so we operate in some countries where it's difficult to get the necessary amount of green energy. And so the second pillar of what we're going to do is come together in some of these countries and help the creation of new capacity through power purchase agreements. So clearly something we can get to action. And the third one is advocacy. I think we together have talked to many policymakers, people working in administration, politicians, and they all say the same thing. Their perception, or for a very long time, the perception of these people were that the business is not supporting the transition, that the business is against it. And so they were very encouraged to hear us, and they told us repeatedly that it's very important that we continue to be this voice and that it helps them in taking bolder action. So that's the 3 things we're going to work on. I think there's a lot more we can do. I look forward to meet everybody in Davos. And again, this global cooperation is working across companies and also with governments is really essential to make the progress we need.
Thank you, Christian. I truly look forward to meeting you and the rest of the Alliance member as we see each other in Davos. It will be exciting discussions. It will be important sharing learning experience with each other. And maybe more than so, an important way for us to show up together, that we are engaged and we take our responsibility for this important topic. See you in Davos.
These specific areas of action by governments will help business to accelerate emissions reductions, scale up innovations, and help to achieve a net zero world by 2050. 1. Eliminate fossil fuel subsidies while protecting the most vulnerable in society. 2. Cut tariffs on climate-friendly goods and develop carbon pricing mechanisms. 3. Support and incentivize first movers in the net zero space. 4. Invest in climate adaptation. If you are a CEO or an employee who wants your CEO to join the Alliance, please use this link.